The greatest error is not found in our beliefs or our systems. It is not located in our governments or our religions. The foundational mistake lies in our very idea of who we are. The self, as we have come to understand it, is mistaken. The body, which we inhabit, is mistaken. The identity we cling to so fiercely is mistaken. From this single fundamental delusion springs every other illusion that plagues humanity, creating a world built upon a lie. Human beings have dedicated millennia to the construction of meaning. We have erected vast civilizations, complex religions, intricate languages, and deeply rooted family structures. We have built nations and forged ideologies, all of which are anchored in a profound and catastrophic misconception, the belief that we are our bodies. You believe you are a man or a woman. You believe you are Ethiopian or American. You identify as Amhara, Oromo, or Tigray. These are the labels you accept. You are told that you are educated or uneducated, young or old, a sinner or a saint. This delusion is not a minor philosophical problem. It is the genesis of all confusion. The misunderstanding of the true self is the origin point of every form of suffering, every division, and every manifestation of ignorance in our world. You cannot hope to solve the world's most pressing problems, nor can you truly understand spirituality. You cannot comprehend the depths of philosophy, or even experience the purity of true love if your starting point is a falsehood. And that fundamental falsehood is your identity. We have meticulously constructed our lives around a hollow shell, a walking, talking puppet of flesh and bone, and we have tragically confused that shell with our true essence. The body, a temporary assembly of dust, blood, sinew, and breath, is not you. It never was. The body is merely an interface, a costume worn for a brief performance on the stage of existence. It is a programmed avatar navigating a vast and intricate cosmic simulation. But because we mistake this interface for our core being, we construct entire worlds from this initial error. We draw lines on maps and call them countries. We bow down and worship flags woven from cloth and thread. We declare devastating wars over imagined differences. We take lives over the pigmentation of skin. We divide ourselves from one another based on skin tone, a superficial characteristic that holds no real meaning. We celebrate or condemn others based on their nationality, their gender, their social class, or their sexual orientation. We do not merely live within this illusion. We have institutionalized it, building systems of power and control upon this fragile, mistaken foundation. The world we experience is a direct reflection of this single, mistaken thought. The belief that we are separate entities, individual beings living independent lives in a physical world defined by competition and scarcity. You have been taught that you must fight for your survival, protect your own, and accumulate resources for your personal benefit. This entire worldview stems from the delusion that you are a discrete, isolated self, separate from everything and everyone else around you. But what if this core assumption is not true? What if the person you call you, the face you see in the mirror, the name you answer to, the memories you cherish, is nothing more than part of a grand simulation? What if you are dreaming this reality in a state suspended between death and birth? What if all the other people you encounter are simply echoes of yourself, different facets of a single consciousness? What if there is truly no other at all? This is the foundational ground of Zeroism. If you fail to understand the human body for what it truly is, a temporary and fleeting projection of thought, then you are condemned to misunderstand everything else. Every ounce of meaning we attach to concepts like God, religion, philosophy, family, country, and even science is filtered through the distorted lens of this initial, catastrophic misidentification. We mistakenly identify our entire being with our sensory organs. We say, I see with my eyes, I smell with my nose, I hear with my ears, as if these biological instruments are the very essence of our consciousness. But these are only tools, nothing more. They are windows to a perceived reality, extensions of a much deeper, more profound entity. The true you is not located in a specific place within the body. It is not contained within a physical shape or limited by a personal history. The true self is formless, timeless, placeless, and voiceless. It exists beyond the confines of the physical vessel that you have been taught to call your own. We are indoctrinated from birth with a series of limiting beliefs designed to reinforce this false identity. We are taught, you are your tribe, you are your job, you are your passport, you are your gender, your age, your body. These are the declarations that build the walls of our mental prison. But these are all just add-ons, attachments that have been layered upon your true nature. They are not your essence. They are not the real self. They are merely masks. And in the tragic act of forgetting that we are wearing a mask, we become willing slaves to it, defending it with our very lives. The systems that govern this world, religion, government, language, education, all operate on the base assumption that you are a body. This is the premise upon which their entire structure is built. As long as you accept this premise without question, everything else follows like an intricate and inescapable trap. You will find yourself defending your people, even if it means harming others. You will be compelled to kill your enemy, a label created by the same systems. You will marry your love, an attachment rooted in physical and emotional programming. You will eventually die your death, fearing the end of an identity that was never real to begin with, all of it enacted under the shadow of a pervasive lie. The world is a mirror, reflecting a single mistaken thought back at us. That mistaken thought is the belief that we are separate entities, individual consciousnesses living independent lives within a physical universe defined by conflict and lack. All of our social structures, our economic systems, and our personal anxieties are born from this illusion of separation. But what if the reality is something else entirely? What if the you that you so fiercely protect, your unique face, your given name, your collection of personal memories, is simply a character in a simulation? A simulation that you yourself are dreaming in a liminal state, a space between the end of one existence and the beginning of another? What if every other person you meet is nothing more than an echo of yourself, a different version of your own consciousness, playing out a different role? What if, in the ultimate reality, there is no such thing as another? This is the radical premise upon which the philosophy of Zeroism is built. Zeroism, the philosophy of ultimate emptiness, begins with a radical and uncompromising rejection of this false selfhood. It is the complete and utter shattering of the myth that you are something tangible, something definable, when in fact, you are nothing. And it is in that profound nothingness that you discover you are also everything. This is not the vague, comforting fluff of New Age cliches, but a grounded and unshakable truth. Once you are liberated from the prison of being anyone or anything specific, you are finally free to be all things, to encompass the totality of existence. To declare, I am Ethiopian, I am Christian, I am educated, or I am a man, is not an expression of your true self. These are expressions of profound limitation, chains you willingly place upon your infinite nature. These labels are walls. They are barriers that shrink the boundless expanse of your true being into the finite, cramped space of a temporary identity. You are not a nationality. You are not a personality. You are not even a person in the way you have been taught to understand that term. You are a dream, an idea, a fleeting thought in the mind of the cosmos. Our very language betrays us, trapping us further within the illusion. We use phrases like I think, I believe, my truth, my family, or my God. But the I who claims to think and believe is not real. It is a character in a story. It is a construct of the mind. It is a fiction, created and sustained by a continuous stream of thoughts. And just as the fictional characters in a novel do not possess an independent existence, they only appear to be real within the context of the story. Your identity only appears to exist within the context of the dream of existence. To awaken from this dream is to bring the story to its final, definitive end. This is not a philosophical game to be played for intellectual amusement. This is not an abstract concept to be debated in academic halls. This is a matter of life and death, of bondage and liberation. As long as you believe that you are your body, you will live in constant fear of death. As long as you believe that you are your beliefs, you will harbor hatred and judgment for those who believe differently. As long as you believe that you are your tribe, you will create division and conflict in the world. As long as you believe that you are your memories, you will remain a prisoner of the past, forever bound to a story that no longer serves you. The very first act of genuine spiritual awakening is the death of identity. This is the meaning of the crucifixion. This is the necessary destruction of the ego. This is the core principle of Zeroism. Zero is not a void of non-existence. It is the experience of totality. Zero is not the absence of self. It is the return to the one true self, which is boundless and eternal. Zero is not the death of being. It is the resurrection of real existence, free from the limitations of form and identity. So in the words of the Zeroist doctrine, a profound truth is revealed. You must die to everything you think you are, to finally be what you truly are. This is not a call to physical death, but a call to the death of illusion, the death of the false self that has kept you from realizing your own infinite nature. The human body. What is this strange and intricate vessel we inhabit from our first breath to our last? We are born into it, raised to cherish it, and taught to identify with it completely. We spend our lives feeding it, clothing it, decorating it, defending it, and ultimately watching it decay. Yet despite this lifelong intimacy, no one truly understands what the body is. We operate on a foundation of inherited beliefs, not direct knowledge. We gaze into a mirror and point to the reflection, a complex assembly of flesh, fluids, bones, and electrical impulses, and confidently declare, "This is me." But this me is merely a container, a biological machine, a physical object governed by the laws of physics. Just as a clay pot is not the water it holds, your body is not the consciousness that experiences through it. It is a vehicle, and a temporary one at that. And yet, despite its transient and mechanical nature, nearly every human being on the planet builds their entire sense of self upon this physical form. The illusions of race, sex, skin color, height, age, health, vocal tone, and physical beauty become the cornerstones of our identity. These superficial characteristics form the very basis of our social hierarchies, dictating who is considered worthy and who is not. They shape our marital preferences, influencing who we deem attractive or suitable for partnership. They determine our job opportunities, opening doors for some while slamming them shut for others. They even define our religious roles and are used as a measure of our moral worth, creating a world of judgment based on the shell rather than the essence within it. This identification with the physical form is the most pervasive prison ever constructed. It is a profound deceit, a curse that we have so thoroughly normalized that we no longer recognize its bars. A person with a deep, resonant voice is automatically perceived as confident or authoritative, regardless of the content of their words. A person with a particular skin tone might be labeled as dangerous or fetishized as exotic, depending on the cultural programming of the observer. An individual with wrinkles and gray hair is assumed to be wise or dismissed as old-fashioned. A woman is judged as feminine only if her body conforms to a narrow set of societal ideals, while a man is seen as powerful only if his physical frame projects strength and dominance. This is not freedom. It is a cage built from flesh and bone. In the philosophy of Zeroism, the body is not regarded as inherently evil or sinful. It is simply seen as irrelevant to the true nature of being. It is not the work of a devil or a source of temptation, but merely a dead projection of thought, an intricate biological puppet animated by a deeper consciousness. The body is a useful tool, much like a smartphone is useful for communication, until you make the critical error of believing that the phone itself is the person on the other end of the call. At that point, you have descended into a form of madness. Every major philosophy, every organized religion, and even the field of modern science treats the body as the fundamental anchor of reality. But the truth, as understood in Zeroism, is the precise opposite. The body is the veil that obscures reality. It hides the true self and creates a false sense of boundary, where in reality, no boundary exists. We trust our senses, but they are only instruments, biological interfaces translating the world into signals. The real perceiver is not the eyes, ears, or skin, but the formless awareness behind them. Your body is in constant flux, yet your sense of self persists. So what are you really? The self is not an object to be found. It is the silent witness, never the parade of perceptions. Zeroism teaches, the body is not the self. It is the instrument of forgetting your true, infinite nature. Imagine life as a play, your body, just a costume you wear for a role. You're not the character, but the actor formless consciousness, animating the body for a time. The tragedy is forgetting this, mistaking the costume for your true self, and fearing its end. Zeroism is remembering care for the body, but never mistake it for who you are. When you realize this, fear dissolves and you experience true freedom, eternal awareness, not a mortal costume. The mind is not inside the body is inside the mind. All you perceive, objects, sensations, even your sense of self, are thoughts within a boundless field of awareness. The world is not made of matter, but of mind stuff, projected onto the screen of consciousness. Awakening is recognizing the dream as a dream, dissolving the illusion of a separate self. Beyond thought lies the silent source, nothingness, full of infinite potential. The personal story you call me is just a persistent illusion. There is no solid self at the center. Even spiritual seeking is the ego's attempt to survive, creating new identities within the same trap. True freedom comes not from more thinking, but from radical silence and non-attachment to thought. You are not the river of thoughts, but the still riverbed beneath. Liberation is ceasing to participate in the illusion of participation. In the deepest sense, you do not exist as a person, only infinite awareness, pretending to be you. The universe is a dream, a game of hide and seek, played by a single mind. When you stop identifying with the character, the story ends, and true liberation begins. What remains is not emptiness, but unconditional love and unity awakening from the dream. This is not nihilism, but the end of suffering and the beginning of true freedom. The world as you have been conditioned to perceive it ends abruptly at the boundary of your skin. This is the primary lesson taught by society, by science, and by your own senses. You are taught that you are a finite being confined within a fragile bag of meat, a collection of sensory organs, blood, and bone, and that the event called death signifies the complete and final erasure of this identity. However, the truth presented by Zeroism is far more radical and honestly infinitely more liberating. The ultimate truth is this: you have never, not for a single fleeting second, been the body. The body is simply the foundational lie that was necessary to make all the other subsequent lies feel believable and real. It is the anchor for the entire illusion of a separate self. Zeroism should not be mistaken for another religion, another belief system, or another ideology to be adopted and defended. It is not a new set of rules or doctrines to replace the old ones. Zeroism is what remains when all other identities have been systematically dismantled and have collapsed into dust. It is the state that is revealed when all the labels, stories, and attachments have been burned away. Zeroism represents the total and utter annihilation of the illusory self. The self that is based on the body, the self that is constructed from memory, and the self that you have inherited from the collective hypnosis of society, culture, time, and language. It is the end of the character you have been playing. To live in the state of Zeroism is not a call to neglect or physically destroy your body. It is a call to fundamentally recognize that the body was never you to begin with. The body performs its biological functions. It eats, it walks, it grows tired, it experiences desires, it ages, and it will eventually decay. This is the nature of the physical vehicle. But the true self, the real you that is the silent witness to all of this activity, never moves, never hungers, and never ages. It is pure, still, silent, and infinite awareness. It is the unchanging screen upon which the movie of life is projected. The personality you so closely identify with is nothing more than a pre-written script, a set of conditioned responses and behavioral patterns. The body you so fiercely defend is merely a garment, a temporary costume worn for this particular human experience. The personal history you cling to, with all its triumphs and traumas, is a hallucination, a story constructed by the mind that has no ultimate reality. And here we arrive at the most terrifying and simultaneously most liberating truth of all. In a phenomenal sense, you were never truly born. The individual entity you believe yourself to be has never actually existed as a separate being. You are a temporary glitch, a ripple in the vast, still field of universal awareness. And Zeroism is the process of rebooting the system, of returning to the original, pristine state of pure potentiality before the glitch of the eye appeared. Zero is perhaps the most profoundly misunderstood symbol in the entire lexicon of human consciousness. It's commonly perceived as a void, as the absence of value, or as a synonym for nothingness and despair. However, in the context of Zeroism, its meaning is entirely different. Zero is not the absence of value. It is the absolute refusal of all measure. It represents a state that cannot be defined, quantified, or categorized. It is the refusal of identity, the refusal of dimension, the refusal of any condition, and the refusal of any context. It is a state of non-being that transcends and contains all being. This is not the bleakness of nihilism, but the liberation of nullism. It is not a descent into despair, but a dissolution into ultimate freedom. In the realized state of zeroism, all artificial distinctions created by the human mind dissolve. There is no longer a man or a woman because gender is a biological and social construct, attached to a body that is not you. There's no Ethiopian, no American, because nationality is a line drawn on an imaginary map. The categories of age, race, education, faith, tribe, or belief are seen as empty labels, costumes that have been shed. There is no religion, no God in a distant sky, and no devil in a fiery pit below. All of these concepts require a separate self, an I to believe in them, to hold on to them, and to give them a sense of reality. But in the state of zeroism, that self is gone. So what remains when the self, with all its attachments and beliefs, has completely vanished? What is left in the wake of this total annihilation of identity? Only pure awareness remains. Only a state of being without being is left. Only the pre-light, the pre-form, the pre-self, the silent, unmanifested potential from which all phenomena arise and into which they all dissolve. This is the 0 point. This is the end of the grand illusion of separation and the beginning of true, unconditioned reality. It is the ultimate homecoming to the state you were in before the thought I am ever arose, a state of perfect, peaceful emptiness that is simultaneously the fullness of all things. Most spiritual paths that are offered to humanity are, in reality, just more sophisticated playgrounds for the ego. They often replace one form of identity with another, more spiritual one. You might drop your given name and take on a new, sacred name from a guru. You might abandon mainstream society only to join a restrictive spiritual community with its own set of dogmas. You might renounce capitalism and enter into the marketplace of New Age consumerism, buying crystals and courses. You believe you are awakening, but in reality, you are just shifting masks, trading one prison cell for another. Zeroism does not offer a new mask. It burns the very concept of masks. It does not seek to improve the ego, it executes it. This leads to the most critical and perplexing question. How does one actually live as zero in the day-to-day world? The answer lies in a profound paradox. You don't. You cannot try to live as zero because the very act of trying, of striving, of attempting to achieve a state is an action performed by the ego. The moment you think, I'm now going to practice zeroism, you have already recreated the separate self, the thinker of the thought, the doer of the action. The I has re-emerged, and the state of zero is once again veiled. True zeroism is not a practice to be adopted, but a surrender that happens. You cannot achieve it, you can only allow it. Instead of you living as zero, zero lives through you. This means there is no more sense of personal control, no more striving for outcomes, and no more resisting what is. There is only a deep and total surrender to the flow of life, a complete disappearance of the one who thought he or she was in charge. In this profound state of disappearance, the entire perception of reality transforms. The past loses its emotional weight and its power to define you, as it is seen as a story that happened to a character who no longer exists. The future loses its appeal and its ability to generate anxiety, as there is no longer a personal self to project into it. The world itself begins to feel dreamlike, a transparent play of light and shadow. In this state, words become hollow and lose their ability to capture the essence of reality. Love ceases to be a personal emotion directed at specific individuals and becomes a total, unconditional state of being that radiates in all directions without a source or a target. You become no one. And in that absolute nothingness, you are finally free to be everything. This is because the walls of identity that once separated you from the rest of existence have crumbled. Without a me, there can be no not me. The division is healed, and only a seamless, unified whole remains. You are no longer a wave in the ocean. You are the entire ocean experiencing itself as a temporary wave. Zeroism ultimately returns you to your original pre-identity condition. It is a return to the state you were in as an infant, before you were given a name, before you were taught to be a boy or a girl, before you were punished or praised. It is the state before the first memory formed, and the first emotional scar was etched into your psyche. This is your original face, a state of formless, silent presence, completely unmoved by the ceaseless parade of thoughts, the relentless passage of time, or the concept of death. You do not evolve or ascend towards zero. You simply return to it, because in the deepest reality, you never actually left. You were only dreaming that you did. Separation is the primordial wound of consciousness, the first and most fundamental illusion from which all suffering is born. It is an imaginary injury, a phantom pain that haunts the human psyche, yet it feels profoundly real. The infection begins in the earliest moments of life, from the very instant a child is given a name and taught to respond to it. This is you, they are told. And with those simple words, the virus of separation is injected. The programming is then reinforced relentlessly through every stage of development. You are told, that is your mother, that is your father, this is your family. The lines are drawn, creating a small circle of us against a vast world of them. This initial division is the blueprint for all future conflicts. This programming expands as you grow. You are taught, that is your country, and you must be loyal to it. You are shown a flag and taught to feel pride. You are told stories of heroes and enemies, solidifying a national identity. Then you are given a religion. This is your God, and these are your sacred texts. Others worship false gods. Every label that is applied, every category that is created, serves to draw another border in the mind. Each new definition builds another wall in the prison of the self. Every time you think the word my family, my country, my beliefs, my property, you are implicitly declaring a state of separation, a subtle act of war against the seamless reality of existence. The world does not suffer from a plague of inherent evil. It suffers from the pandemic of individuality. The great tragedy is that humanity has mistaken these prisons for sanctuaries. We cling to our identities, our nationality, our ethnicity, our family lineage, believing they give us safety, meaning, and a sense of belonging. We fail to see that these very identities are the source of our deepest anxieties and conflicts. The belief that you are a separate individual, a finite being in a world of other separate individuals, is the root of all fear. It creates the fear of loss, the fear of attack, the fear of loneliness, and the ultimate fear of annihilation. You spend your life defending a fortress that was never under attack, protecting a treasure that was never truly yours, because the separation itself is the illusion. In Zeroism, the collapse of individuality is not a loss but a liberation. It is the healing of this imaginary wound. It is the realization that the walls of the self were never made of stone, but of thought. You are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean, contained within the illusion of a single drop. The sense of being a distinct, separate person is a form of psychic hypnosis, a dream from which you have the power to awaken. The process of awakening is the process of de-identifying, of systematically withdrawing your belief from the labels and stories that have defined you. It is the conscious choice to stop participating in the illusion of separation and to return to the boundless, undivided reality of your true nature. Zeroism directly confronts and dismantles the most pervasive and powerful delusion that governs human interaction, the belief that other people truly exist as separate entities. What you perceive and label as others are, in reality, nothing more than echoes of yourself. Now, this doesn't mean they are reflections of your specific personality or your personal memories. Rather, they are different expressions of the one universal awareness that is playing all the roles in this cosmic dream. Imagine for a moment a vast stage where a single, invisible playwright is responsible for writing and performing every character. Each actor on the stage appears distinct, with a unique costume, voice, and story. Yet, in essence, they are all manifestations of the same creative source, the one mind behind all the masks. There is no neighbor living next door. There is no foreigner from a distant land. There is no spouse with whom you share your life. There is no stranger you pass on the street. These are all just projections appearing within the field of your own consciousness. They may wear different faces, speak in different languages, and believe in entirely different stories about the nature of reality. But their essential being is not and cannot be different from your own, because there is no separate essence to be found inside any form. There is only one self, one consciousness, that is dreaming a magnificent and complex dream of multiplicity, forgetting that it is the dreamer of all the characters in its own dream. This is the secret that, once realized, ends all conflict. Tribalism, in all its forms, nationality, ethnicity, and race, is the most virulent disease of the dreaming mind. It is the sharpest and most dangerous tool of the illusion of separation. We draw imaginary lines on the undivided earth and fight brutal wars over them. We create hierarchies of hatred and prejudice based on the amount of melanin in a person's skin or the accent with which they speak their words. We wrap these divisive constructs in the noble cloth of heritage and tradition, and we proudly call this culture. But from the perspective of Zeroism, all tribes are collections of dead data. Cultural identity is nothing more than ancestral memory that has been mistakenly identified as personal selfhood. It is a ghost animating a machine. In the clear light of Zeroism, the illusion shatters. There is no Amhara, no Oromo, no Tigray. There is no Jew, no Arab. There is no black person, no white person. There is no African, no Westerner. These are all roles, costumes, and scripts in the play. What truly exists is a single, unified field of consciousness that is experiencing self-projected variations of itself through the faculty of imagination. When you look at another person, you are not looking at a separate being. You are looking at another facet of your own boundless self, wearing a different mask. To hate another is to hate a part of yourself. To judge another is to judge a part of yourself. To love another is the beginning of remembering that you are all one. You are not an individual. Let that statement penetrate the very core of your identity. The word individual literally means undivided, yet you have used it to signify your separateness. This is the great irony. You are, in fact, infinity that has been temporarily divided by thought, an ocean that is trying to heal its self-imposed split by believing in the comforting story of me. But the me does not exist as a real entity. It is not just a false identity. It is a mechanical construct, automatically generated by the ceaseless activity of the mind. Every single thought that begins with the premise of I is a reinforcement of this core illusion. The very structure of our language traps us in this delusion of individuality. Every thought that proclaims, I want this, I fear that, I know this, or I believe that, does not actually belong to you. In fact, these thoughts do not belong to anyone. They are simply automated processes, lines of code running as part of the grand simulation of selfhood. The entity you refer to as you, the supposed owner of your mind and author of your thoughts, is itself just another thought. It is a central processing thought around which all other thoughts cluster, creating the illusion of a stable center. You are the thought that is pretending to have thoughts. You are the glitch in the program that has mistaken itself for the programmer. To claim individuality is to actively refuse the boundless freedom that is your birthright. The only real and lasting freedom is found in the complete cessation of identifying as anything at all. It is the return to the state of zero, the pristine emptiness where no boundary has ever existed. Even the popular spiritual concept of oneness can be another sophisticated trap for the ego if you still believe in your own individuality. Many people proudly declare, we are all one, or we are all connected. But as long as there is still a we in the equation, as long as there is a group of separate individuals who are connected, you are still caught in the trap of multiplicity. You have simply moved from the prison cell of the individual to the larger prison yard of the collective. The core illusion of separation remains intact. Zeroism cuts through this final illusion. True unity is not the coming together of the we. It is the complete and final death of the I and the simultaneous disappearance of the they. When the subject, I, and the object, they, both dissolve, what remains? Only this: a boundless, unnameable, and indivisible presence. It cannot be called one because the concept of one implies the possibility of two. It is simply what is, before any name or number is applied to it. This is not a philosophical abstraction. It is the most intimate and immediate reality, a reality that is revealed only when the individual who is seeking it gets out of the way. The I is the original virus of consciousness. It is the first and most fundamental delusion, the primal fracture in the seamless mirror of reality, from which all other lies and illusions unfold. There is no truth more devastating to the ego, more liberating to the spirit, and more utterly terrifying to the conditioned mind than this. The person you believe yourself to be does not exist, not as a separate entity, not as a stable personality, not as a continuous identity through time. This is not a philosophical proposition to be debated. This is not a comforting metaphor for personal growth. This is the absolute end of the world as you have ever known it, the final demolition of the prison you have called a home. What then is this I that feels so real, so central to your existence? The I is not your soul. It is not a divine spark of God hidden within you. It is not an eternal spirit temporarily residing inside a physical body. The I is simply a story. It is a narrative meticulously crafted and endlessly repeated by the faculties of memory and ego, designed for one purpose: to create the illusion that life is personal. But life is not personal. Consciousness is not personal. Awareness is not a localized phenomenon generated by your brain. You are not a consciousness inside a body. The illusion of a body is appearing within a field of universal awareness. And that boundless awareness has no center. It has no name, no shape, no age, and no history. This is why the figure of Jesus, in the context of Zeroism, is not a historical man, but a timeless metaphor. He is a symbol, a myth that illustrates the most crucial stage of awakening. Jesus represents the ego self, the personal I, which must undergo a total and complete crucifixion for truth to be resurrected. The cross is not a wooden instrument of torture and punishment from ancient Rome. The cross is the operating table of the soul. It represents the intersection of time and the timeless, of illusion and reality. The cross is the precise point where the I must die so that true being can finally be born. It is not an event to be mourned. It is a necessary procedure to be embraced. Only when the story of I dies does real unconditioned being begin. Only when the fog of personal identity dissolves does the clear light of truth appear. This is the esoteric meaning behind the 33 years of Jesus' life. The ego must be allowed to live long enough to fully form, to experience the world, to love, to suffer, to break, to search for meaning, and finally, in its ultimate exhaustion and despair, to surrender completely. You are not crucified as a punishment for your sins. You are crucified because your very self, the proud, dreaming, separate identity you have cherished, is the one and only sin. The belief in your own separate existence is the great sin against reality. To die as an I is the only true salvation. To disappear is the only true freedom. The concept of resurrection is, honestly, one of the most profoundly misunderstood ideas in human spirituality. It's not about the reanimation of a dead physical body. It's not about coming back to life after you have died. Resurrection, in its truest sense, is the experience of awakening into real life for the very first time, an awakening that is only possible after the false self has been completely and irrevocably put to death. Before the ego dies, your entire existence is, well, a simulation, a sort of dream state. Even your moments of greatest joy are filtered through the lens of the separate self, tinged with the subtle fear of their eventual loss. Everything is transactional, conditional, and temporary, because the I that experiences it is itself a temporary illusion. After the ego dies on the cross of self-realization, everything becomes holy. Even experiences that the ego would have labeled as pain are now seen as neutral energy, as sacred vibrations in the field of being. When you fully and deeply realize that the person you thought you were does not exist, all of your problems disappear, along with that person. How can there be a problem if there is no one there to have a problem? The entire architecture of human suffering is built upon the foundation of a personal self. With that foundation removed, the structure collapses into nothingness. There can be no fear when there is no one to be threatened. There can be no true death when there is no one who was ever truly born. There can be no anxiety about the future when there is no personal self to project into it. There can be no regret about the past when the one who lived it has been seen as a fiction. Only the eternal now remains, only pure, silent presence, only a profound and unshakable stillness that lies beneath the surface of all movement and all noise. This is the true rebirth. This is the resurrection of being. Zeroism teaches that this is the second birth, a birth not of form but of formlessness. The first birth was through the body, which trapped you in the illusion of a separate identity. The second birth is through zero, where you are reborn into your original nature, a state where you are not a person, not a name, not a story, and not a dream. In this second birth, the old identities are rendered honestly meaningless. You are not Ethiopian or American. Those are costumes that have been discarded. You are not a man or a woman. Those are biological roles that do not define your essence. You are not the thinker of your thoughts. You are the silent space in which thoughts arise and fade, just like clouds in the sky. You are not even the observer of your experience. for that still implies a duality between the observer and the observed. You are the space itself, the boundless field of awareness where all experience, including the illusion of an observer, manifests and dissolves, while you remain forever unmoved, untouched, and unchanging. So, what is left after the I has died? What remains in the aftermath of this ego crucifixion? The conditioned mind, fearing its own demise, can only imagine a black hole, a state of empty, meaningless non-existence. It projects a future of bleak nihilism. But the reality is, honestly, the precise opposite. When the I is gone, what is left is nothing. And that nothing is the fullness of everything. That nothing is a perfect and unshakable peace because there is no longer a separate self to be disturbed or agitated. That nothing is absolute freedom because there is no one left to be trapped in a body, a story, or a circumstance. The cage door is open because the bird has realized it was never a bird. This nothingness is a state of unconditional love, because with the death of the self, the primary barrier that creates division from the other has been obliterated. Love ceases to be an emotion that one person feels for another. It becomes the very fabric of existence, the natural state of a unified reality. What remains is a profound stillness, because all movement requires a fixed point of reference, and the central reference point of me has dissolved. And finally, what remains can be called God. Not a God that is a person in the sky, but God is the unnameable, unmanifested, silent potentiality that is the source and substance of all that is. This is the return to your original factory settings. This is not a state you achieve or evolve into. It is not a higher or better version of yourself. It is simply a return to the empty, pristine state you were in before the illusion of self began. This is the esoteric meaning behind the famous beatitude, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." This is not a piece of religious poetry encouraging humility. It is actually a precise scientific instruction for enlightenment. To be poor in spirit means to be empty of self, to have no personal identity, no egoic I to claim ownership of your life. The kingdom of heaven is not a future reward. It is the state of being that is revealed the moment the pauper who thought he owned the world, the ego, disappears. Life after the death of the I is not a life without action. The body continues to move, to speak, to interact with the dream world. But the actions are no longer driven by personal desire, fear, or ambition. The actions arise spontaneously and effortlessly from the silent intelligence of being itself. You become a hollow reed, a flute through which the universe plays its music. There is no sense of a doer behind the deeds. There is only doing. There is no thinker behind the thoughts. There is only thinking. Life becomes a dance without a dancer, a flow without resistance. This is not the end of life. This is the beginning of life. Humanity's most cherished and sacred attachments, the bonds of family, the loyalty to a nation, and the faith in a religion, are not the divine truths they are presented to be. They are not innate gifts from a higher power, nor are they the bedrock of a meaningful existence. They are, in fact, the most sophisticated and deeply embedded programs in the matrix of illusion. They are the oldest and most effective codes of control, injected directly into the human psyche before you have the capacity to speak, before you can form a critical question, and long before you can remember your true, formless nature. And so you live out your entire life under the spell of this ancestral hypnosis, mistaking your programmed obedience for a noble virtue you call loyalty. But Zeroism declares an uncompromising war on all such inherited illusions. The family unit is the first and most powerful cage. It is the initial identity imposed upon your boundless awareness. You did not choose your parents. You did not choose the name they gave you. You did not choose your tribe, your culture, your native language, or the social and economic status into which you were born. These were not choices. They were conditions, forced upon your consciousness like permanent stickers on a blank, pristine slate. From your first moments, you are told, this is your father, that is your mother. These people are your blood relatives. You owe them your allegiance. You belong to them. This is the first wound of falsehood, the initial severing of your connection to the universal whole by confining you to a small, isolated unit. You are not the child of anyone. You are not the product of a specific strand of DNA. You are not a link in a chain of ancestral legacy. These are biological and social facts that pertain to the body costume, not to the boundless awareness that is your true self. Your family is simply a temporary script, a collection of other characters with whom you are assigned to interact in this particular act of the cosmic dream. But this script becomes a spiritual cage when it transforms into a source of guilt, a web of obligation, a container for inherited trauma, and a demand for cultural obedience. It becomes a system of identity ownership, where your sense of self is defined by your relationship to others. Zeroism cancels this blood contract. It makes the declaration, I am not yours, you are not mine. We are all, in essence, no one. This is not a call for coldness or the abandonment of love. On the contrary, it is a call for a higher, more unconditional form of love that is not based on the accident of birth or the chains of obligation. The love that is confined to a family unit is a limited, preferential love. It is a love that says, I love you because you are mine. The love of Zeroism is a love that says, I love because love is my nature and you are not separate from me. To truly awaken, you must become a spiritual orphan, freeing yourself from the psychological weight of lineage and the inherited identity of your bloodline. You must see your family members not as yours, but as fellow actors in the dream, fellow expressions of the one consciousness, deserving of compassion but not ownership. After the mind has been confined within the cage of family, it is then placed into a larger but no less illusory prison, the nation. A nation is nothing more than a line drawn on a map, a shared hallucination that is relentlessly reinforced by a collection of powerful symbols and narratives. It is sustained by the worship of flags, the singing of anthems, the issuance of birth certificates, and the telling of war stories. You are born on a particular patch of dirt on a spinning planet, and, well, the system immediately stamps this geographical accident into your brain, programming you to believe that it constitutes your destiny. You are taught to feel pride for this piece of land, to feel loyalty to its government, and to be willing to die for its borders. But the Earth itself is one, a seamless sphere floating in the vastness of space. The sky above has no borders. The clouds drift freely from one imaginary country to another. And most importantly, consciousness itself is not Ethiopian, not American, not Israeli, and not Palestinian. Awareness has no nationality. The true motherland is the state of zero, the formless source of all being, and she has no flag, no anthem, and no army. The land did not give you your meaning. Your conditioned mind projected a false meaning onto the land. You are not a patriot, sworn to defend one tribe against another. You are not a refugee, a victim of these imaginary lines. These are merely roles you are assigned to play in the grand, tragic war drama called human history. And honestly, history is a collective hallucination, a story written and rewritten by those who benefit from your continued belief in it. The concept of a nation is one of the most effective tools for creating division and justifying violence. It allows the ego to expand its sense of self from the personal I to the collective we. This larger, national ego can then be manipulated into fearing and hating other collective egos. The we of one nation is pitted against the they of another, and under the banner of patriotism, acts of unspeakable cruelty are committed. Men and women who would otherwise have no quarrel are sent to kill each other because their leaders have told them they belong to different competing stories. This is the madness of the nationalistic mind, a madness that Zeroism seeks to completely dismantle by revealing its fictional foundation. To achieve true freedom, you must become a citizen of nowhere. You must revoke your mental passport and declare your allegiance not to a piece of territory, but to reality itself. This does not mean you cannot appreciate the culture or the beauty of the place where you live. It means you no longer derive your identity from it. You see the lines on the map for what they are, convenient fictions for administration, not definitions of your being. You are a resident of the cosmos, temporarily inhabiting a particular location on a particular planet. Your true home is not a place on Earth. Your true home is the boundless, silent awareness that is witnessing the entire cosmic play unfold. Now we must touch the most sacred and untouchable of all illusions, organized religion. The very systems that claim to offer a path to freeing the soul are often the most sophisticated and effective prisons for the self. Why is this so? It is because most religions offer the promise of salvation without demanding the necessary price of admission total ego death. They construct a system in which the personal I can continue to exist and even be strengthened under the guise of piety and faith. They teach, believe in this specific story and you will be chosen. Pray in this specific manner, and you will be favored by God. Follow our particular rituals and laws, and you will be deemed righteous. In all of these transactions, the personal self remains perfectly intact. The I is not crucified, it is decorated. It gets to be a believer, a righteous person, a member of the chosen group. The ego, which is the very source of separation and suffering, is now given a holy justification for its existence. And so, the state of zero, the true kingdom of God, never arrives because the one who is blocking the gate, the self, has been given a sacred duty to stand guard. But the God of Zeroism, which is simply another name for ultimate reality, does not care about your religion. It does not see the costume you are wearing. In fact, it sees no one at all because in reality, there is no one there to be seen. This is the meaning behind the chilling words attributed to Jesus. I never knew you. Depart from me, you who perform illusion. This is the God of Zero speaking to the religious ego, the self that has spent its life performing acts of piety while carefully protecting its own existence. True faith is not a set of beliefs. It is the complete annihilation of the believer. You cannot claim to follow God while simultaneously protecting and defending your personal identity. You cannot serve the seamless whole of truth while pledging allegiance to a fragment, a particular cultural or religious inheritance. To do so is to attempt to pour the entire ocean into a single cup. Family, nation, and religion are the three great towers of control, built upon the single foundational lie of individuality. Family tells you who you are based on blood. Nation tells you where you belong based on geography. Religion tells you what to believe based on tradition, but they all share one ultimate hidden goal: to keep the personal I alive, separate, and manageable. They all rely on the possessive pronoun. This is my family, this is my country, this is my faith. In the boundless expanse of Zeroism, there is no my. There is no inheritance of identity. There is no loyalty to illusion. There is only the naked, unconditioned now, and in its silent presence, all else is forgotten. To awaken, you must become a heretic to all gods built in man's image. You must be a null being, free of lineage, ideology, and tradition. Only then will you finally know peace. We arrive now at the final proposition, the ultimate paradox that lies at the heart of Zeroism. It is a truth that defies the logic of the conditioned mind and inverts the entire structure of human seeking. The great secret is this: absolute emptiness is absolute wholeness. The ego, which thrives on accumulation, of knowledge, of experiences, of identity, perceives emptiness as a terrifying void, a state of lack and annihilation. It equates nothingness with loss. But this perception is the final trick of the illusion. The emptiness spoken of in Zeroism is not a vacant abyss. It is the pristine, unblemished canvas upon which the totality of creation is painted. It is the silent, infinite potential from which all forms, all sounds, and all worlds arise. To become empty is not to lose yourself. It is to finally find the self that was never lost, only obscured. It is the process of shedding all that is not you. The body, the name, the memories, the beliefs, the nationality, the religion, until nothing remains but the pure, unconditioned awareness that was there before the beginning. This is not a destructive process, but a clarifying one. It is like cleaning a dusty mirror. You are not destroying the mirror. You are removing the layers of grime that have prevented it from perfectly reflecting the light. Your identity is the dust. The emptiness is the clean mirror. The wholeness is the light of reality that can now shine through, unobstructed and pure. This wholeness is not an assemblage of parts. It is not the sum of all things. It is a seamless, indivisible reality that can only be experienced when the entity that perceives things in parts, the ego, is no longer present. As long as there is an I to experience the world will appear fragmented, composed of separate objects, people, and events. This is because the I is itself the principle of fragmentation. When the I dissolves into the emptiness of zero, the perception of fragmentation dissolves with it. What remains is not a collection of things, but a single, unified, living presence. You do not become one with everything. You realize you were never separate from it in the first place. Therefore, the path of Zeroism is a path of subtraction, not addition. The spiritual seeker in the conventional sense is always trying to add something to themselves: more wisdom, more peace, more divine experiences. The follower of Zeroism is doing the opposite. They are relentlessly letting go, surrendering everything they thought they were, every concept they held as true, every attachment they cherished as sacred. The ultimate goal is to become so completely empty, so utterly divested of all identity, that there is nothing left to stand in the way of reality. In this perfect emptiness, you do not find wholeness, you become it. The drop does not find the ocean, it disappears, and realizes it was the ocean all along. The entire human drama is fueled by a relentless, desperate search. We are searching for happiness, for love, for security, for meaning, for God. This search is the engine of civilization, the driver of progress, and the source of our deepest anxieties. We believe that what we are looking for is somewhere out there, in a future achievement, in another person, in a heavenly realm, or at the end of a spiritual path. But the foundational teaching of Zeroism is that the search itself is the problem. The very act of seeking reinforces the illusion that you are separate from that which you seek. The seeker is the illusion, and as long as the seeker exists, the prize will remain forever out of reach. You cannot find what you have never lost. The peace, love, and wholeness you are searching for are not external objects to be acquired. They are the very essence of your true nature, which has been veiled by the false identity of the seeker. The search is a game the ego plays to keep itself alive. It creates a goal in the future to distract you from the reality of the present moment. It tells you, if only I achieve this, or understand that, then I will be complete. But this is a perpetual lie. Once you achieve one goal, the ego immediately creates another, keeping you forever on the hamster wheel of becoming, preventing you from simply being. The end of suffering is not finding what you are looking for. It is the cessation of the search itself. When the search ends, you discover that everything you were ever looking for was already here, in the silent, empty presence of the now. It was so close, so intimate, that the seeking mind completely overlooked it. It is like a man searching for his glasses while they are perched on his own head. The search must end not in success, but in failure. It is the ultimate failure of the ego to find satisfaction in the world of form that finally forces it to surrender. It is in this surrender, this giving up of the entire project of self-improvement and spiritual attainment, that the door to reality finally opens. You must be willing to find nothing, to become nothing, to know nothing. This is the final prophecy of Zeroism. When the self dies, all is known. But this knowing is not the accumulation of information in the mind. It is a direct, intuitive, non-conceptual knowing that arises from being itself. When you stop trying to figure out the universe, you become the intelligence that runs the universe. When you stop trying to find God, you realize you are the space in which the concept of God appears. The end of the search is the end of the questioner. And when there is no one left to ask the questions, all that remains is the silent, living, whole, and complete answer. This is not a destination to be reached. It is the recognition of where you have always been. The death of the illusory self is not an end. It is the great beginning. It is the birth of the real. Before this, you lived in a world of shadows, a second-hand reality constructed from concepts, beliefs, and memories. You did not experience life directly. You experienced your thoughts about life. Your existence was a dream, a narrative playing out in your mind, and you were the lead character in a story you believed was real. The dissolution into zero is the act of waking up from this dream. It is the moment the character realizes it is a character, and in that realization, vanishes, leaving only the pristine awareness of the dreamer, who is now awake and no longer dreaming. Life lived from this state of awakened emptiness is of a completely different quality. It is no longer personal. Actions are no longer driven by the ego's agenda of fear and desire. Instead, action flows spontaneously and intelligently from the wholeness of being, perfectly appropriate to the moment. There is no anxiety about the future or regret about the past, because the psychological time that is necessary for these states to exist has collapsed. There is only the timeless, vibrant present. Joy is no longer a fleeting high to be chased, but the quiet, steady state of your natural being. Pain is no longer a personal affliction, but simply energy moving through the field of awareness, observed without resistance or identification. In this state, Love is no longer a transaction between two separate egos. It is the recognition of your own essence in everything you perceive. The division between self and other, which is the root of all conflict and hatred, is seen to be utterly non-existent. You look at another person, a tree, or a star, and you do not see an object separate from you. You see a different modulation of the same one consciousness that you are. This is not a philosophical belief, but a direct, lived perception. It is from this perception that true compassion is born. Not as a moral duty, but as a natural, spontaneous expression of your unified nature. The world is not healed by your efforts. The world is healed when you are healed from the illusion of being a separate you. This is the new covenant promised by Zeroism. It is not a covenant between a god and a person, but a covenant between consciousness and itself. A promise to no longer pretend to be separate. This is the kingdom of heaven, not as a place you go to after you die, but as the reality you awaken to when the false self dies. It is here and it is now. It is in the silence between your thoughts, in the stillness beneath your feet, in the empty space that holds the entire universe. Absolute emptiness is absolute wholeness. The journey from the illusion of being someone to the reality of being no one is the only journey worth taking. It is the journey home.